Okay, Alexander, let's just get into it because we have a lot of ground to cover. Let's get into the peace deal, the Nagorno-Karabakh peace deal brokered by Russia, by Russian President Vladimir Putin with Azerbaijan and Armenia. And you can say kind of Turkey, but you'll get into exactly all the players, who won, who lost, and what are the implications of this brokered peace deal, which I think is I don't know. I don't feel very good about it, but I'll get into it. Give us the details, and let's talk it out.
I don't think anybody feels good about it. Actually, superficially, the Russians are the big winners. I mean, they're now pouring troops into Nagorno-Karabakh. They are going to set up a military headquarters in Azerbaijan. So they've introduced for the first time since the end of the Soviet Union troops into Azerbaijan proper. This hasn't been widely reported, but Peskov, who is Putin's spokesman, has confirmed it. They've cut the Turks completely out of the negotiations. I mean, the Turks have been saying all day that they're going to be sending peacekeepers into the Caucasus also, and to be involved in, patrolling this deal. The Russians have said absolutely firmly that is not true. And also the Turks have been saying that, the conflict will now be brokered in a bilateral framework with Russia and Turkey negotiating acting as partners to negotiate the deal in the same way that they did in Syria and to some extent in Libya. And the Russians, again, have said absolutely not true. They've said that there is no conceivable way that the Turks are going to be involved in any of the negotiations at all. So in a sense, as I said, the Russians have now got their troops everywhere in the Caucasus, apart from Georgia. They've brought the fighting to a stop. They've preserved most of Armenian Nagorno-Karabakh, and they've managed to keep their bridges open to Azerbaijan. In fact, they probably increased their influence in Azerbaijan. So on the face of it, they look like the winners. I think in reality, what they've done, and I think it's another example, actually, of what we've been saying for some time, which is that Putin is starting to lose his touch. What I think they've actually done is that they've annoyed everybody. The Armenians have had to give up large areas of territory, which had been, encircling Nagorno-Karabakh and some of Nagorno-Karabakh itself. And that obviously is a very bitter blow for them. And there's huge protests in Armenia about it. At the moment, those are directed at the Armenian government of Mr. Pashinyan. But, I'm sure that some of that anger will be directed at Russia at some point. And the Azerbaijanians have not only not recovered Nagorno-Karabakh, but if you actually go into the detail of this agreement, the small print, you realize actually that they've lost it forever. Now, can I explain that? Firstly, they've had to agree to Russian peacekeepers being introduced into Nagorno-Karabakh. That is something that the Azerbaijanians have been consistently opposed to. They did not ever want to see Russian peacekeepers there because they know that there is absolutely no conceivable possibility that they could ever take on the Russian army. And if they ever thought that, well, they saw what happened to Georgia in 2008, when it did take on the Russian army, and as a consequence, it got completely defeated in the space of just 5 days. So they did not want to see the Russians in Nagorno-Karabakh. They are there. But the other thing is that there's now going to be a road link. The Azerbaijanians have had to agree to a road link between Armenia proper and Nagorno-Karabakh, which will be protected by the Russian military, which in effect means that Nagorno-Karabakh is now being tied to Armenia in a way that Azerbaijan itself has formally agreed to. So that, in a sense, is the first big step towards detaching Nagorno-Karabakh from Azerbaijan. The Azeris would have been extremely upset about that. They've, in return, got an agreement for a road link from Azerbaijan to their own enclave of Nakhchivan, which is encircled by Armenian territory. And I think, there's some people who are trying to say that these, the one somehow balances off the other. But of course, Nakhchivan is not disputed territory. Nagorno-Karabakh is a road link from Armenia to Nagorno-Karabakh. In that sense, is a far more consequential affair than a road link to Nakhchivan. So it's a big first step, unacknowledged, towards Azerbaijan accepting that they will never get Nagorno-Karabakh back. Now, the other thing is, of course, if you look at the peace deal, it says, that the Russian peacekeepers will be there for 5 years and that both sides will be required to agree to keep the peacekeepers there. I would not take that very seriously. I predict those peacekeepers are going to be there, not just for a long time, but perhaps even indefinitely. For one thing, I think as night follows day, at some point, perhaps not immediately, the Russians will put this agreement to the UN Security Council. They will probably get the French to co-sponsor it, which will give the appearance that there's Western support for it. And that, of course, will then shift the question of, the question of the peacekeepers away from the parties to the UN Security Council, where Russia is a permanent member, and of course, where Turkey is not. So the Russians have achieved, if you think about it in these terms, if you look at this mathematically, quite a lot. But both the Azeris and the Armenians are not going to be happy with this agreement. The Turks are not going to be happy either, because they've been cut out. And that's why, by the way, they've been spending the whole day trying to pretend that the agreement is different from what it is. Given that neither side is happy, one wonders how long it's going to be before this whole thing resumes again. And one wonders also whether Armenians in particular will feel that they can rely on the Russians to the extent that they once did. So the Russians have increased their influence in the Caucasus at the price of losing trust and friendship there. And that is, I think, something which, being perhaps over clever with your diplomacy can end up doing to you, unless you are, a bit more straightforward about what your objectives are and about who your friends in the region are. So, yes, as I said, the Russians have won. The Armenians have lost lots of territory. So in that respect, they've lost. They have got, eventually, they're going to get a lot of Nagorno-Karabakh, but it's not everything that they once had. They've lost large areas of territory. And Azerbaijan is not going to get Nagorno-Karabakh. And Turkey is frozen out. And sooner or later, all of these people, from their different perspectives, are going to be angry with Russia. At the moment, they're angry with themselves. So there's protests going on in Yerevan. We hear reports of Armenian parliament buildings being stormed. Azerbaijan is a dictatorship, so not really very much scope for protest there. But bear in mind that it's an oil dictatorship, and oil prices are very low at the moment. And they spend an awful lot of money in this war, and they've lost thousands of men. And apparently the pandemic has taken a big hold there. So, they're not in a particularly good state, and maybe the situation is going to start being politically precarious also. Turkey has failed to gain what it wanted. Economic crisis is deepening in Turkey. And, Erdogan has just sacked the finance minister, who is, by the way, his son-in-law. But ultimately, though they're at the moment all angry with themselves, I predict as night follows day that before very long, they'll all be angry with Russia. And so what exactly the Russians have gained from all of this, I'm not really sure. I mean, at one level, as I said, they've got their troops throughout the region. They're the masters of the diplomatic game. They've taught the Armenians that you have no one else basically to turn to. They've taught the Azerbaijanians that without our support, that Russian support, they can't achieve anything. They've taught the Turks that the Caucasus is not theirs to meddle in, but they've done it at the price of losing friendship and trust and storing a lot of anger towards themselves in the long term.
Yeah, I think this was another PR hit for a bad hit, not a good hit for Russian President Vladimir Putin, in that I think a lot of people are going to be pissed off at him, starting with the Armenians. But from that point on, a couple of questions. It looks like Russia just went in and just acted very, very heavy. I don't want to say heavy-handed. I mean, they just took over. They took over and they said, screw it. We're just taking over. We're going to put troops here, put troops there. This is the deal. You guys accept it. Did they get rid of the jihadists that Turkey was flooding into the region? I think that's important. And the territory that Armenia lost, that wasn't populated territory. That was more of a buffer zone, correct?
Well, okay, let's take one step into. First of all, I think that talking about it being a PR hit is almost the least of it. I mean, obviously, you can get a PR hit and then you can recover. But what has happened is that there's been a fundamental loss of trust.
A reputation hit.
A reputational hit, exactly. And, and that, I think, is something that will linger. I think that a lot of people, who trusted the Russians, they were straightforward, especially in Armenia, to some extent, even in Azerbaijan. If the Russians had come along and said to the Azerbaijanians, well, look, these are our red lines, you can't cross them, you've got to stop, we want to see a conflict there wouldn't have been this fighting. So now the Azerbaijanians will also feel aggrieved because the Russians didn't make clear their red lines. So it's a reputational hit and it's a loss of trust. And that, once it's lost, is never recovered, not very easily. And I think a lot of people, as I said, in Armenia especially, but in Azerbaijan too, will eventually say to themselves, well, we can't really trust the Russians. The Russians are in this only for themselves. They are manipulating us. They are using us. We don't trust them. Now, that's not a good position to be in, whatever you gain in the short term. But, that's that. Now, about the other things, firstly, there's absolutely nothing in this agreement about those jihadi fighters. But I am sure that there will be a further push to get them out before very long. As I said, for the Russians, this is a red line. And you're quite right. This was a very heavily imposed decision. As I understand it, Putin basically told Erdogan, Putin told Erdogan on Saturday that if this Armenian town, this town of Sushi, which is in Nagorno-Karabakh, was captured, there would be no further advance beyond that tolerated. And then after that happened, he telephoned the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan and said, we're moving in. And that's exactly what's happened. And again, if I may also say, what this does show is the overwhelming power of the Russian military in this region and the way that it's got its logistics sorted out, because it's moved incredibly fast. Russian deployments were happening within minutes of this ceasefire, of this deal being agreed, which is, in itself impressive. But heavy-handed, I think, is the right word. As I said, it's essentially an imposition. Now, what will happen to these jihadi fighters, we will see. Whether these territories were populated by Armenians or Azerbaijanians before 1993, the territories that Armenia is and Nagorno-Karabakh is handing back, I simply don't know. They are, most of them, mostly outside the region of Nagorno-Karabakh itself. But we must always remember when we discuss that Nagorno-Karabakh is not an organically emerged entity with natural borders that have been, evolved over time. It is an artificial creation of Joseph Stalin. I mean, he just drew the lines. Now, whether he drew the lines with any real concern for the people who lived there, I mean, obviously the people within Nagorno-Karabakh were 80% Armenian. But whether these other territories that were located around it, whether they had significant Armenian populations, either when Stalin drew the lines or after the 1993 war, I simply don't know. Maybe maybe people who are watching this program can inform us about this. I would be interested to know. What I can say with certainty is that yes, much of this territory was taken in the 1993-1994 fighting by the Armenians to provide a buffer zone around Nagorno-Karabakh. But what undoubtedly also happened is that the Azerbaijanians who lived there left, or if you prefer, were driven out, and an awful lot of Armenians moved in. So Sushi, which is this town that we've been hearing so much about over the last few days, was apparently a majority Azerbaijani town before 1993. But there is no doubt that it was an entirely Armenian town until, until a few days ago.
Yeah. That was my point, is that, a lot of this land did act as some sort of a safeguard for Nagorno-Karabakh proper, like, the main area. But was this the game plan all along from Russia? In that, they kind of allowed Turkey, because this was Turkey. Let's not kid ourselves. Let's say the truth about this. This was Turkey fighting Armenia, and okay, Azerbaijan may have acted as a bit of a proxy in that effort, but this was Turkey. So Turkey, Russia calculated that Turkey would maybe get to this Shusha region, this town, this area, and that would be their stopping point, so that then they can move in and they could accomplish a couple of things. Is one, they can impose this peace deal. They could get their troops in the region and safeguard the region by having their troops in both countries, and they can get Pashinyan out, which I think was also something that they probably were aiming for. So I mean, by Russia not, because if Russia stepped in for Armenia and really decided to support Armenia, it would have been a no contest from the get-go, but they didn't. So I'm starting to think maybe this was a calculated move on Russia's part, so that they could get, as you said, an outright win on all levels.
Well, it is in fact increasingly looking like that. And can I just say, more and more people I understand in the region are saying it. To some extent, even Pashinyan himself is now saying it. Of course, he's always had a difficult relationship with the Russians, so maybe it's not surprising that he's trying to shift the blame to some extent on the Russians. He's not being very, outspoken about it, but I wonder whether that isn't going to be the emerging narrative from him before very long. But the fact of the matter is, it does look as if this was the intention all along. Let this fight happen and then use it to strengthen Russia's position in the Caucasus. If one looks at the question of Nagorno-Karabakh, what has effectively now happened is that Russia guarantees it. So it's no longer defending itself anymore. It is being defended by the Russians. Now that, in effect, locks Armenia into an even closer dependency on the Russians than before, because if the Russians withdraw, the Turks and the Azerbaijanians could presumably roll in, because by itself, Nagorno-Karabakh cannot take them both on. At the same time, we now have Russian troops in Azerbaijan itself, where previously, Azerbaijan had pursued an independent policy and had to some extent aligned with the West. So yes, the Russians may very well have game planned it. I mean, they're not chess players for nothing. But I come back to what I said. Yes, if they did game plan it, it might look clever. At a certain level, it might even be clever. But it is also something that is going to exasperate many people there. And you're quite right. If the Russians had taken a strong line right from the outset, we would not be in the situation where we are now. The outcome would have been completely different. And certainly Azerbaijan and Turkey would have been forced to pull back. But they would at the same time have said, well, we know that in this region, the Russians are not going to let us get in, and they won't let themselves be pushed around. Even they now must feel used. I mean, Erdogan didn't send all his, jihadi mercenaries and his drones into the Caucasus to increase Russian influence there.
Yeah, I mean, the propaganda machines, the Turkish and the Azerbaijani propaganda machines are spinning this as a victory. There was a lot of propaganda, a lot of fog of war as to what was actually occurring on the ground as well. I mean, we called it as pretty much a stalemate. Up to a certain point, it just kind of stood still. But, you can see that right away from the get-go, Armenia feels like, Russia has betrayed them. Azerbaijan, for the moment, as you said, it is a dictatorship. And obviously in Turkey, you have Erdogan, and they're spinning this as a Turkish victory and as an Azerbaijani victory. But I think you're right. In maybe 3-6 months, a year from now, they're also going to start to feel very bitter towards Russia, because essentially they've been taken over as well. What other solution would you have, prescribed for Russia to take? Would the solution have been to go in there forcefully in the beginning, back Armenia as, the collective treaties dictate, and put a red line for Turkey right away? Or would there have been another option that they could have taken? Because this seems to me, looking on the outside, looking in for me, I once again see a Vladimir Putin that is very hesitant throughout this whole thing, throughout this whole conflict, from beginning to now, that is very hesitant to take on Erdogan head to head, whether it's Syria or whether it's in the Caucasus. It seems that he just doesn't want to tell Erdogan, you're not going to do this. If you do it, we're going to crush you. He doesn't want to go there. He plays this cat and mouse game with him continuously. And Erdogan, he takes 2 steps and then goes 1 back. He takes 2 steps and then goes 1 back. But he's moving a little forward every now and then. It seems that Putin's just kind of, okay, well, I'll work out some sort of solution for now. I'll put a Band-Aid on the wound.
Yes. I mean, the other thing to say about this is, of course, it's the kind of clever diplomacy which Putin does very well. One wonders whether any succeeding Russian leader would have the skill to carry it out to the same extent. So that is also going to be a problem, because when Putin is not there, and we've already said in another program why he may not be there for very, very much longer. It may be difficult to sustain this kind of game, especially with someone like Erdogan. What alternatives did the Russians have? I think they had a very straightforward alternative. They could have seen that there was a build-up of Turkish forces in Azerbaijan, which was already happening over the course of the summer. They could have come along to Erdogan, and they could have said in emphatic and clear terms and publicly that any resumption of the fighting in the Caucasus with transfers of Syrian jihadi mercenaries there would not be tolerated. And they could have come to Baku, and they could have said to Baku, this is simply not an option for you. You've got to pursue a political settlement. We are prepared to act as honest brokers, but you will not mix up with the Turks. And I think that would have been enough, actually. But probably someone in Moscow, perhaps Putin himself, calculated, well, let's use this thing. We don't like Pashinyan very much. We don't really want Azerbaijan continuing to play this game of, being a friend and an enemy at one and the same time. So let's stir the pot, let things boil up until the point comes when we can flood the place with our troops, which is exactly what's happened.
Yeah, all right. It's a dangerous game, It's a dangerous game that they're playing with Erdogan, because they keep on emboldening him, the Russians and Vladimir Putin. And I think Putin is, once again, I'll say it again, I've said it over and over, he's taking a lot of damage from the way he's been handling Syria and now the Caucasus. A lot of damage.
Including, as we've discussed before, within Russia itself. There are a lot of Russians who are not in agreement with this policy. But can I just say something else? I mean, there's two things to say. It is dangerous for two reasons. Firstly, it is dangerous because Erdogan is not a reliable partner. And as you absolutely say, he will play a dance with the Russians. He will, pretend to be friends with them one day, pretend maneuver to be their enemy. Another day, he will distract them here, push against them there, make a deal with them, one moment, break that deal the next moment. He's not somebody who is ultimately a reliable partner. And I think this is something that Putin himself seems to struggle to understand. I don't know why, but maybe he's got lots of people around him who are pushing, this relationship with Turkey. As you said before, there are lots of economic interests and financial interests involved in keeping the deals, the connection with Turkey going. Also, I think it's a relationship that he's invested so much in personally. He spent so much time with Erdogan that I think he feels reluctant to say to himself, well, this investment was a bad investment and I'm just going to write it off. That's always a danger. And, Putin would not be human if he wasn't a bit like that. But it's dangerous because Erdogan, as I said, is not a reliable partner. It's dangerous for one other reason. And this is, we've talked in previous programs about what a volatile place the Balkans is and how in the Balkans things, when they start heating up, they can easily spiral out of control. The Caucasus is that multiplied by 100. These are fighters. All the people of the Caucasus are tremendous fighters, very proud and brave people, and very fiery. I mean, I don't want to start, with retreating into stereotypes, but I mean, this is the tradition there. It's the tradition. People care about these things, that they're very proud, that they care about the dignity of their nations. If you end up being, the enemy of everyone, you could very well find that there will come a point where they start taking pot shots at you. Now, I don't expect that anytime soon. As I said, the Russian military is so overwhelmingly stronger than all the others in the Caucasus that, that really isn't an option anymore. But as with the US in the Balkans, Russia and the Caucasus could very easily find that a system which is ultimately based on force is not a very durable one. So it's a point that, they need to understand. They can't just rely on the power of their army and on economic linkages and things to hold things together. They need friends. They need friends there. Without those friends, they start being exposed. They start looking dangerously exposed. And that's why I think this agreement is, frankly, despite all appearances, a big misstep.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just leave it on this note. It seems that with time, I'm not saying short term, but medium, long term, it seems that Russia is losing the Caucasus with what's going. I mean, I look at Georgia, and I mean, there's stuff going on there, which I'm sure we'll probably cover very soon. I look at Georgia and I look at what's happening with Armenia and Azerbaijan. And I think to myself that, once again, the Russians just seem to be losing the PR battle in all of this. And I think about Ukraine, and I think about, how the Americans came in and swooped in, and with the help of the Europeans, but the Americans swooped in and they just, they grabbed Ukraine out of boom. I don't want to make it seem like it was right away. I mean, there was a process. There was the Orange Revolution, and then there was the Maidan. But they worked it, and they eventually brought Ukraine on side. Did it have a cost? Yeah, it had a cost with Crimea and the war in the East. But for the most part, they accomplished their goal to a certain extent. I mean, no one would have ever thought that Ukraine would have such animosity towards Russia today. And I think that maybe, as Putin leaves and transitions out, there could start to be, over the years and the decades, an opening for the U.S. to also take advantage of the animosity that could build towards Russia in the Caucasus. And I mean the Caucasus as a whole.
It is possible. What I will simply say about that, though, is that I have to say that what this whole affair has shown is how ineffective, in effect, the United States has been in the Caucasus. If Russia has lost friends, the United States has lost, if I can say, put it a slightly different way, it's lost reputation. I think Pashinyan especially depended a lot on the US. He thought he could rely on the US to put pressure on Turkey and on Azerbaijan. And in the end, it was surprising, perhaps, to him how little influence the US ultimately had on this. So I don't think the Russian position in the Caucasus is threatened in that sense. And of course, the Russians will tell you, which is true, that they did tend to play very, very long games. I don't think it's irretrievable, this. But I think that it was perhaps, what we say in Britain, too clever by half. It will leave a lot of angry people in the Caucasus. And if the Russians are going to win them back, they have a lot of hard work to do.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. And one quick question: What's the future of Armenia now?
Oh, well, at the moment, well, first of all, I mean, it's still an entirely viable state. I mean, it's a strong state.
No, for the current government. I mean, for the current government.
That is a very good question. I would have thought. I mean, this is Armenia. Our Armenian viewers can perhaps discuss this better, but I would have thought that Pashinyan is going to find it very, very difficult to cling on, because I mean, he's clearly been outplayed in this. And a lot of people in Armenia at the moment are very angry with him. If he's pushed out, it's quite likely that the people who replace him will be much more sympathetic to Russia than Pashinyan was. I mean, Pashinyan did try to pursue a sort of multi-polar policy. But, that's the short term. What happens in the long term may turn out differently. So, yes, I think that Pashinyan looks like he's in severe trouble. And by the way, the Armenian president is clearly distancing himself from him. So it's, precarious how long he can remain prime minister. But, and it's quite possible we will see a new pro-Russian government or more pro-Russian government in Armenia. And of course, Armenia, in a sense, has now become more dependent on Russia than it was. But that's the short term, or if you like, even the medium term. It's not the long term. And we don't quite know how things will shape out over the long term.
All right, we'll leave it there. Alexander Mercurs, thank you very much, guys. Like this video, click on that subscribe button down below. Hit that like as well, share this video. Please donate to us on PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribe Star. Your donation really helps out this channel a whole lot. And also go to the Duran shop, pick up some merchandise. That also helps out this channel a lot. We got shirts, mugs, hoodies, all kinds of good things.
This is the mug with the flag of Greece and, of course, of Armenia, I think. So, and indeed of Russia. So we got lots of mugs, best mugs in the world, indisputably and by far. We got the best shirts in the world, long sleeve T-shirts, short sleeve T-shirts, shirts with lots of flags, polo shirts. We've got hoodies, we've got stickers, we've got amazing hats, truckers hats, and baseball hats, also with flags. If you come to our shop, buy our wonderful products, and the feedback we get for our products from our viewers who buy them is phenomenal. You will be delighted with what you buy for yourself, and at the same time, you will be supporting our hardworking channel. At the same time, if you want to support our channel, look out for us, as Alex said, on our various platforms, BitChute, and the others, ODYSEE, and find us on Subscribe Star. Go to us on Patreon. It's not easy to do the kind of work we do, but if you support us, we will continue to be here. And please join us for our next broadcast.
All right, Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.